Good morning. Welcome, ladies, to In Search of Prosperity Sisterhood. I'm so glad to have you here with us. And I want to start by just saying, wow, I'm going to start with some gratitude. I'm just so thankful that you are all here with me today, either live or on the replay. We have some ladies traveling for the holidays still, so they are incapacitated at the moment. But as you listen to this and interact, be sure to interact. Whether it's throwing something in the comment section that kind of just hits your brain or heart at the right moment, throwing in a question, raising your hand, those kinds of things. And then in our discussion, we're going to just dive into those things. So I told the ladies before I went into this recording that we would not be recording our discussion afterwards because there's going to be some intimate pieces to this that sometimes it just can't be something that is recorded. And until I learn how to edit videos, that's how we're doing this. And it's actually been working out really well. So we'll just see where that all lands, but welcome. So this morning, in light of the holidays, we decided last week that we wanted to talk about receiving, because this is the gift giving season, and receiving is hard sometimes. And yet we find ourselves in that receiving position, and sometimes we wonder how we got there. Sometimes it's just this amazing thing that lands on our laps. And as you know, I go through and I make notes for the day. So I did make some notes and I ended up journaling about this. And because, as a lot of you know, I've gone through quite the receiving season myself. So I really wanted to break that down and say, okay, what are the pieces that anybody can take from the idea of receiving, and then also where we can take it as a sisterhood, as individuals going out and spreading our awesomeness throughout the world. So I opened with my journaling with the words, receiving starts with contentment. And I instantly went to I am statements and gratitude and loving life where you're at, where it's at, where your things are at. So that when you receive something, you know where to put it because you know what you have, right? Like whether it's receiving a compliment or receiving an actual physical gift and everything in between. Like if we don't know what we already have, where does it fit? Then something else that I teach in I am statements is future receiving, being thankful for something that you haven't yet received. Isn't that weird? But when you set goals forth, when you set visions forth, why not be thankful for them, have a place for them before you actually receive them? So this makes me think of like lottery winners. Like lottery winners, they didn't know what to do with that money in the first place, so there's no place for it, so they're broke in 6 months anyway. Or right? Like that cycle happens. That's a random thought. That's not something I put in my notebook. But receiving, where does it go? You have to have a place for it. And I'll go back to I am statements. If you have that current, that contentment, you know what you have. And then you go into the future receiving, the thankfulness for that, the future receival of those things. You have a place for it. So in today's world, when we receive things, we tend to not feel worthy. So an I am statement that I was taught a couple years ago was, I am worthy of my own mission. So if you set out to give this thing away in the world, you have every right to receive it back for yourself. And we go about our life and we deflect compliments, right? Like, oh, I love your dress. Thanks. I got it for $2. Right? Like, you don't just receive it. Or you give it back to them. Oh, I really like your shoes. Right? You're not pausing to receive that. So we go about the world and we would deflect compliments. And I want to take that and say, the other person, yes, Tressa, it's much easier to give than receive. That, I mean, that's like the mantra of, I don't know, the century or something, right? Like, but if we can't receive, I'm going to go back to that, okay, Tressa? I have a whole thing on that. Another thing we do is we say, you didn't have to, or you shouldn't have, when that person was acting on their heart. And we talked about this in our very first session. We need to honor other people's hearts and other people's promptings, because that was given to them to give away. So accepting it instead of deflecting it, saying you didn't have to, you shouldn't have, being grateful. And I did this just last week. I met someone for coffee and she insisted that she pay. And instead of, because really, honestly, in my heart last week, like it was, and in my wallet, it was helpful for her to pay for my coffee. But I didn't accept it the way I could have. Then, so finally on my little list, something that probably comes up in codependency, the I didn't get you anything. Again, the worthiness of like, well, I didn't get you something. Why do I deserve something from you? It doesn't have to be even. It's not, the world is never, especially in relationships, it's never apples for apples. In transactions, it is, but not in relationships. Relationships is I give you an apple, you give me an orange, you give the apple I gave to you to so and so, and they gave you a banana. Right? Like it's never I gave you an apple to receive an apple back. So the whole idea of I didn't get you anything, that's not what it's about. It's about the fact that you need to honor that heart. So finally, receiving isn't about the receiver. Yes, the gift was about you, the receiver, but the receiving itself is it's for the giver. So when you think about the gifts of life, they require that belief, going back to I am statements, and that desire, that determination for that thing. Belief and determination make your desires attainable. But if it's just a desire, it can turn into desperation. And what's in between that is giving and receiving and gratitude. So I'm going to go back to what Tressa said about giving. And so this analogy or this thought that I have or vision that I have in my head for this is the idea of a closed hand and an open hand. So when you're going through healing of some kind, your hands are open, whether it's the idea of like being just present and being on this earth, you're opening your hands and you're touching things. You're touching the dirt. You're sitting there. You have open hands. In meditation, they have you open your hands palm up. It's that idea of receiving. You cannot receive with a closed fist. So that made me think of a year ago when I was learning all the things about babies and their needs and wants and things like that. They taught me that a clenched fist means they're discontent and they need something. They're closed off. They're not open to the world because they're discontent. They need something. And so when their tummy is full, when their diaper is dry, those types of things, their hands open. And then they can touch things and they can explore and they can learn. But if they're discontent, trying to open that fist, I'm sure every one of you ladies on this call has tried to do that, right? And so it's that idea of if you're discontent, you need your needs, and then you can open up and explore and spread your joy. So receiving starts with that contentment. If you go back to your goals and your aspirations and what you want to give and receive in this life, again, if your hand is closed, you can't receive the abundance you're asking for or that you say you want, you desire, right? But when you add belief and determination and you feed yourself the things that you need to feed yourself in order to get the yeses, in order to receive the check in the mail that pays your bill, in order to receive the gift of something that alleviates that stress. Belief. When you believe anything, then anything is possible. Then it does exist. And when you're content with what you have and thankful for what you're about to receive, you're open to whatever that is. Sometimes it's not exactly what you were expecting, or it's a little loosely interpreted yeah, you know what I mean? But you're open and you're receiving. And so I have one story before we go into our conversation. A year and a half ago, I received a gift in the mail. My friend said, check your mailbox. It should be there any day now. I sent you something. Okay. And when I received it, I opened it up and I said to myself, I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I mean, I've never used one of these things before. It was a journal that started in July. It was actually like a planner. Okay. So it was an 18-month planner that started in July. And it was not laid out the way I would ever use a planner. Okay. All the negative, right? It was not laid out to use the way I used a planner. It started in the middle of the year. I already had a planner I wasn't using in 2022, if I'm being completely honest, right? And yet I'm still open to receiving. So that's when I got creative. We've talked about some creative thinking in the last couple weeks. So I made this connection when I opened it. I was exactly halfway through my pregnancy with Meredith, my rainbow, on the day. Like, that was the day on the calendar. I turned 20 weeks, and it was the day I received this gift. And it was a halfway calendar. Making sense now? Thinking in the positive, thinking in the creative. And it was the same week I started feeling her, like really feeling her. And so it turned into a journal for her. And it's from that place of, what am I going to do with this? To, ooh, what can I do with this? Because I was in that mode of receiving, understanding that this is a gift, and then making it more of a gift, right? Because now this is a journal I get to give to Meredith. And I could have stayed in that negative. I could have stayed in that non-receiving mode of, what am I going to do with this? Since when do I use a halfway calendar? Right? Like, it's not laid out the way I like my calendars to be laid out. I'm all those negative things. And yet when you open yourself to receiving, you have that beautiful opportunity to turn that gift into a gift for yourself, to fully receive it. Sometimes when we receive things, again, we go to deflection of some kind or that negative thinking. But I'll challenge you to turn it to the positive, to turn it to that gratitude, to say thank you and shut up. And sometimes your receiving season can just be too much. So we talked about last week having a simple mantra, having some words that you've put together that allow you to receive. I'm a big fan of scripts. So sometimes if I don't know what to say, or I can't even, I'm not in the right brain space, or I can't remember something, or what have you, or where I was when I bought that gift, or why I bought that gift, right? Or sent that card, or what have you. It's that script or that mantra that says, that's what I do. Thank you. That's what I do. Or having a script that allows them, so they say, I'm thinking of you. That takes a lot for some people to reach out and say, I'm thinking of you. And that's a gift that you can receive. And a simple response can say, just thank you. 2 words, thank you. I can get on my soapbox about those 2 words too. But those 2 words can be so powerful. And it doesn't have to turn into a whole roadshow. It doesn't have to turn into feeling unworthy, because thank you and then shut up. Right? I poke my head because we want to say other things. But I challenge you to receive and to see and to open up that space to see where it takes you. So, thank you for joining us this morning. And we're going to go into our live discussion. I'm going to end our recording here. And if you had any questions, any input, I've got some comments in the chat too. So we're going to jump into those right away. And we're just going to see where this takes us, because receiving, you need to apply some creativity sometimes. And that's what it's about. And it's about that connection that you have with yourself and that you have with others. So thank you for connecting with us today. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll see you soon.